Ladies and gentlemen, this is an incredibly auspicious moment for a number of reasons. Firstly, that you're here, and without you, the Poetry Marathon really would not be the Poetry Marathon. And also because the marathons every year are absolutely an integral part of our programme. They're really key. In the summer, and for the Serpentine, the summer stretches quite a long time, from, well, late June, let's say, through to October. So for this, it's ongoing, beautiful weather. Whatever you may think, it's just wonderful weather. And the reason the summer stretches a long time for us is that we have our exhibition in the gallery. This year it was Jeff Koons, followed by the wonderful, important show of Gustav Metzger's work. Our annual architecture commission, this pavilion designed by Sana. Now in the 9th year, it is still unique worldwide as an architecture commission at this level of ambition. And the Poetry Marathon and our Park Nights programme, which runs throughout the summer, is absolutely integral. The three things really, the three strands of our programme really, really work together. And in tandem with that, of course, the education programme continues. This morning started earlier for us. We had the guests of the Frieze Art Fair who came to breakfast, and we did a tour of Gustav's exhibition. And since then, I've had the enormous privilege of being in our education studio and being able to talk to Agnes Varda, Eleanor Braun, Eileen Miles, Tracy Emin, and that's just for starters. And that was before the marathon. It's going to be the most incredible day, and really we're very, very delighted that you're here. Of course, there's a long exchange between artists and poets. Guillermo Apollinaires' calligrams made a strong literary connection to Cubism, while the Dada movement involved poets as well as artists, from Hugo Ball to Tristan Tzara. A decade later, in 1924, André Breton published La Révolution Surréaliste, another document testifying to the exchanges between visual artists and poets. This connection runs through the 20th century with the 1950s abstract expressionism and its ties to the New York School of Poetry. In the 1960s, the artistic network Fluxus formed innumerable close links between the visual arts and poetry. And with this Poetry Marathon, the fourth in the series, we aim to revitalize the historical links between poetry and art. The fourth in this series has been conceived by Hans-Ulrich Obrist, the Serpentine Gallery's co-director of exhibitions and programs and director of international projects. And this part of our program began in 2006 with a 24-hour non-stop event, which Hans-Ulrich and Rem Koolhaas interviewed 68 people in the Serpentine Pavilion of that year, which Rem designed. It was followed in 2007 by the Experiment Marathon, in which figures from the worlds of art, science, and academia were invited by Hans-Ulrich and Olafur Eliasson to perform experiments in the Serpentine Pavilion 2007, which he designed. In 2008, the Manifesto Marathon, when leading contributors from the worlds of art, architecture, science, literature, philosophy, fashion, and film were invited to present their manifestos for the 21st century as part of a 2-day event in the Serpentine Gallery Pavilion, which was designed by Frank Gehry. This year's Poetry Marathon is a culmination of the Park Nights programme, which is a series of Friday night talks, performances, music and film, and screenings that take place in the pavilions from July to October annually, our long summer. The Park Nights form one part of the 4 strands of the exhibition of the Serpentine's programs: education, architecture, education, and of course public programs. As I said, this annual architecture commission is unique. And as we sit here, from Monday, this will disappear. It begins to be taken down. It will go to its new home in Switzerland. And we're already thinking of what we'll do next year. Next year is our 40th anniversary. 40th anniversary of exhibitions, of architecture, of education and public programs. And of course, we're thinking how we can celebrate this. But today, we're here for the Poetry Marathon, and we're absolutely delighted. The previous pavilions have been designed by Zaha Hadid in 2000, Daniel Libeskind with Arab in 2001, Toyo Ito with Arab in 2002, Oscar Niemeyer in 2003, MVDV with Arab in 2004, which was unrealized. Alvaro Siza and Eduardo Soto de Muro with Cecil Baumann of Arup in 2005. Rem Koolhaas and Cecil Baumann with Arup in 2006. Olafur Eliasson and Kjetil Thorsen in 2007. And as I said, Frank Gehry in 2008. This pavilion sited on our lawn is our annual new wing. It's what we do every year. It's the only time in the year that we have a cafe. It's the only time in the year that outside the building itself we have a meeting place for people to come. It attracts 300,000 visitors over a 3-month period, and which is more than the Venice Architecture Biennale. We're deeply grateful to the Annenberg Foundation, to the Arts Council England Grants for the Arts, Mary Donnelly, who's a very long-term supporter of the Serpentines. We're indebted to you. Thank you. And to Maker's Mark, the Kensington Hotel, and Vitra, all for their generous support. Our media partner is the Times. In 1997, the Serpentine Gallery completed the renovation of the building. It changed in numerous ways, and it means that we can now do museum shows, which really weren't possible before. Ian Hamilton Finlay and Pierre Maria Simic were commissioned by us to create a project for the Serpentine Gallery in our grounds. You can see one part of the 3 elements on this tree, this beautiful tree plaque. The other element of it are the benches that circle behind, just in front of the yew hedges that go around the curve there and on the other side. It was a very important commission for us because we are an institution that doesn't have a collection. But it was important for a number of different ways. Ian Hamilton Finlay is an extraordinary Scottish artist and poet. It was extraordinary because he has made this astonishing garden which is celebrated worldwide. Was astonishing because for him, the written word and his art, there was no difference. The two cohabited in unison. And so who could have been more appropriate than Ian Hamilton Finlay to be the commission, to record the moment when the Serpentine entered a new phase of its life. On the paved area, he chose to quote the 18th century philosopher Francis Hutcheson: "The beauty of trees, their cool shades, and their aptness to conceal from observation have made groves and woods the usual retreat to those who love solitude, especially to the religious, the pensive, the melancholy, and the amorous." On the benches, he quoted Virgil. And as we begin this poetry marathon today, it is marvelous to remember him, and also perhaps appropriate to quote him again. "And now from the steadings already smoke is rising. The shadows of the light blue mountain tops extend. It's a kind of coming home." It's also my very great pleasure to thank some of the many people who've been involved in making this day possible. Firstly, Hans-Ulrich Obrist, the co-director of exhibitions and programs and director of international projects. For all of you, it is really an introduction that's not needed. This is his brainchild, and we're really thrilled that we're in the 4th year of this epic journey, which focuses on poetry. Sally Talent, head of programs, Nicola Lees, public programs curator, Mia Jankovic, Yasumi Omolu, Lucia Petrioski, public programs assistants. All of the home team that I've mentioned, and many more besides, have worked tirelessly to make today a reality. Importantly, this is a moment for me also to acknowledge the incredibly important contribution of Tim Griffin, editor of Art Forum, who will make introductory remarks after Hans-Ulrich. And he has been key to the project throughout. So thank you very much.
Thanks so very much to Julia, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow travelers. As Julia said, it's one of the very important things throughout the avant-garde in the 20th century, this dialogue between art and poetry, and we felt very urgent here with this marathon to reconnect to this. Somehow it really all started in Krakow when Filip Areno and I visited Czesław Miłosz in his Krakow home about 7 years ago. Miłosz was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1980, and is widely considered one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. What was so fascinating during our long conversation was that it transpired that as a poet, Miloš had a far closer relationship with the visual arts than with music. Poetry is often linked to music rather than the visual art because of its relationship to time and rhythm. However, Miloš's work is structurally more akin to a collage maybe than music, much like a visual artist's work. Miloš himself saw this method of visual assemblage in the work of T.S. Eliot, in the way that Eliot juxtaposed scenes of contemporary life. Miloš translated Eliot's The Wasteland into his mother tongue and also translated the essay, The Painter of Modern Life, by 19th century poet Charles Baudelaire because of their shared interest in the visual arts. So this somehow a homage maybe or in memory to Czesław Miloš. We'd also like to make a second homage, and that's to Cedric Price and his idea of the Fun Palace, because ever since Julia and I started our collaboration in 2006, it had all to do with bringing the pavilions and the marathons together. Julia made this invention of the pavilions in 2000. It's now the 9th year. I had started with the marathons in 2005, and we felt that it could be incredible to make marathons and pavilions encounter and somehow create this idea of Cedric Price of almost like having a Kraftwerk of ideas or a content machine. Another very important predecessor to the Poetry Marathon was a project in Granada, which was actually an idea of Isabella Mora, who introduced me to this marvelous house of the poet Federico Garcia Lorca, who obviously as a poet had many dialogues with Dalí, the artist, with Buñuel, the filmmaker, ever since the 20s. So we invited many visual artists and poets over 2 years' time to the house of Lorca to somehow further deepen this dialogue. One of the participants was Said Wombly. He brought into the exhibition a drawing, Verde que te quiero verde. And Said Wombly must also be thanked here, because he was maybe the very first artist who, when I visited him as a student in 1989 in Rome, told me how urgent he thinks it is for our time to bring again together more dialogues between art and poetry. Lorca is important maybe also in relation to the Duende. As Lorca says, the arrival of the Duende presupposes a radical change to all the old kinds of form, brings totally unknown and fresh sensations in search of new landscapes and unknown accents, announcing the endless baptism of freshly created things. The Duende never repeats itself any more than the waves of a sea do in a storm. Now, as Julia said, we'd like to thank many of the participants, all of you. I've now the great pleasure to introduce our senior advisor, Tim Griffin, with whom we've been working very closely on the marathon, who will present some ideas, and then I will introduce the first speaker. Very warm welcome to Tim Griffin.
Thanks to both Hans-Ulrich and Julia for hatching this idea and seeing it through. Poetry is often a matter of timing, and time is short, so I'll try to keep my remarks brief. But first, offering just a little bit of context. The Serpentine Marathon, I think, takes place at what is a particularly opportune moment. The first in quite some time, I think, when a real potential exists for an engagement among artists and poets. It's more than a romantic connection, although, of course, it's also that. It has to be that. This is partly due to numerous poets' recent foregrounding of theories of appropriation and allegory that resonates with models in art from the past couple decades. But it's also partly due because the models currently being employed to produce art often give the impression of being at their limit. In other words, the syntax of contemporary art forces the question to what extent are so many artworks diagramming institutional systems that circulate them rather than confronting the existing conditions within art and culture more generally for their chosen media. To what extent, in other words, is so much art a representation or effect of itself? It's in the face of such questions that a new syntax or language is sought out by art, and this kind of shift in cultural grammars is, after all, the purview of poetry, which I think many poets would agree is going through many of the same dialogues, signaling that it might be part of a broader cultural reflection. Systemic problems always force one to re-examine questions of context. So if, in a different time, Michel de Certeau advocated a long poem of walking in the practice of everyday life, proposing turns of phrase to introduce skips and jumps into our experience of the instrumentalized city, so a new grasp of everyday experience today might evolve around re-engagements with language, concrete and abstract in all its iterations. And on a private note, I'd actually like to mention Kenneth Koch as well, who I think is an unheralded member of the New York School of Poetry, but who also has said to all of his students who would approach him asking for help, are you sure you want to be a poet? You can't sell a poem. You can't hang a poem on the wall. You can't dress up and go to a poem. And yet here we are today. Thank you.